writer and social media coordinator for the Expo. I'm also a huge Buffy fan. I used to be on Newsnet, all TBS, and I followed it on in the comics. I'm a comics fan too. I thought I would read George's bio, or...
Oh, you have one?
I do.
Oh, this is always scary because I don't know where people get these bios from.
I thought it was you.
Could have been. I do a bio every year though, so I'm always wondering, ooh, which year is that one?
Oh, really? Well, this is an entertaining one. George's Jeanty is an Eisner Award-winning New York Times best-selling comic book artist, best known for his work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer seasons 8 and 9, published by Dark Horse Comics. The American Way, Gambit, Deadpool, Weapon X, and Bishop, the Last X-Men. Born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in Miami, Florida, George has considered a career in acting while majoring in the fine arts at Miami-Dade University.
It was a nothing little college. It was a community college. You could accredit it to.
But ultimately decided to pursue a career as a commercial artist. Excuse me. George has made comic books his focus, inspired by legendary comics artists like John
Byrne?
Byrne.
Wow. How can you not know that?
John Byrne, Michael Golden, Alan Davis, and a list of others too long to include here. His first break into comics was in 1994, working for several independent publishers like the now defunct London Night Studios, and by 1999, Georges had moved to Georgia, joining the ranks of Atlanta-based Gaijin Studios, and doing regular work for DC Comics. George's first regular ongoing monthly comic book was Bishop, the Last X-Man in 1999, published by Marvel Comics, followed by Gambit, Deadpool, and Weapon X. He left Gaijin in 2003 to co-found Atlanta-based Studio Revolver. And in 2006, Wildstorm, DC Comics, paired Georges with Hollywood screenwriter John Ridley for The American Way, a controversial comic book miniseries set in the turbulent 60s.
Which is a great
Why is
series,
it
actually.
controversial?
It was set in the 60s, controversial in the sense that it dealt with Kennedy and the first black superhero in this quote-unquote real world that they were getting, which in the early 60s, if you know your history, probably didn't go over well, and did not go over well in this comic either.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm looking up.
It's really good. It's actually very good.
Sounds awesome. Soon after, Georges was handpicked by Buffy the Vampire Slayer's creator, everybody, Joss
Joss
Whedon.
That guy who directed Avengers, I think. I'm not sure.
Something, yeah. Maybe because of TV show.
I could have had
Some comic book thing.
one or two.
Do you guys know about that? About S.H.I.E.L.D.? Unfortunately. He was handpicked by Joss to be the regular artist of the highly anticipated Buffy seasons 8 and 9, the comic book continuation of the popular Fox TV series. Okay, I have a few questions, and I thought we could open it up to questions from you guys. I read that you were not originally a Buffy fan, like me, you weren't like into the show when it was first on.
Right.
And I was wondering, what was your first exposure to the story? Was it
To which story?
to Buffy first? Was it Josh saying you wanted to draw the comic?
That was it, yeah. I had seen something years ago. I'd seen an episode, but I'd seen it because John Ritter was in it, an actor who died, obviously, a few years ago. And I was more of a John Ritter fan. I think this was season 1 or 2
It's
of
like your
Buffy.
first episode, Ted?
And that was my first episode, but I wasn't watching it for Buffy. I was watching it for John Ritter. So I saw, you sort of, when you're not really into something, you kind of pay attention when there's a commercial, and you take your time coming back. And yeah, that's where I guess he's a robot for Joyce, who's going out with this robot individual. And Buffy, of course, says, "Oh, there's something wrong here. My mother's dating something that doesn't seem right," and it turns out he's a robot. So that was the thing I saw, but again, I wasn't paying attention to the mythos. Yeah, I was just paying attention to the actor I enjoyed. So I couldn't even tell you I watched the episode in so much.
Okay. My follow-up was, when did you become a fan? Because I get the sense from your interviews that you're really a fan.
I became a fan when I got the gig. It's one of those things, and I'm sure you hear about it all the time. It makes me look better than I should, but Joss really did say when he wanted to continue, and this was all him. It's funny, Dark Horse was publishing Buffy even when the show was on the air. There's a good 50 issues or so of Buffy comic books. None of those had anything to do with Joss, though, interestingly enough. He'd never actually written a comic. He'd never actually written a comic before Frey, and it was all of that Buffy stuff he never had anything to do with. So Flash forward now to 2006, 2007, when Joss says, you know what, I've been haunted by Buffy now that it's off the air. I've got all these, I want to continue this thing. He actually approaches Dark Horse and says, hey, you know, I'd love to do this. Would you guys be interested? Of course, they're sitting going, oh my God, we've been doing this for years, but we've never had your input. We would love to have your input. We'd love to have you do something. And so he obviously said that, well, what about if we did something like a season 8 and continue where things going? And he was very dubious about this, thinking, would you think anybody would go for that? And of course, Dark Horse is doing cartwheels, saying, oh my God, are you kidding? Yes, we can do this. And doing so, then they said, all right, well, I'll write. And basically, he approached it like he was doing a season, obviously season 8. And if you'll know in any of the TV shows, Joss would normally come in, maybe do the first episode, and then let other writers come in like Jane Espenson or Drew Goddard or people like that, and then he'd maybe do an episode in the middle, and then of course he'd always come in and do the last episode, and that's just how he established his run on Buffy pretty much. And essentially that's what he was going to be doing here at season 8. And he said, well, it would be cool too if we got a lot of the writers who wrote for Buffy and coming in and doing that. And of course, he's saying this do you think anybody would like that? And of course, Dark Horse is like, are you shitting me? Yeah, we got to do this. Of course we got to do this. And in that process, they like, all right, we've got the writing down. Now, let's see about the artwork. And I'd never worked for Dark Horse. I'd never worked for Dark Horse. I, again, never knew Joss, he's just a big comic fan, and apparently he was aware of some of the stuff I did at Marvel early on, and apparently he had a list, and I was on that list. I've never asked, I'm afraid to ask where on that list I was exactly. Was I number 1 or was I number 10? But it just makes me feel a lot better to say, well, I was on a list. Let's leave it at that. I won't go any further. And they got a hold of me, and I, of course, since I never worked for Dark Horse, the editor got a hold of me and said, hi, my name is Scott Alley, we don't know each other, but Joss Whedon wants to start up Buffy the Vampire Slayer again, and he wants to see if you're available for this sort of thing. Now, those of you not in comics, who don't work in comics, this is a trick that's often done in comics, and in any real profession. When you throw around somebody's name, who you know that person's gonna know, as a way to entice you to come over and say, oh, really? Stan Lee wants me? Sure, okay, I'll come by. Or, George Clooney wants to have coffee with me? Yeah, okay. I basically have been in the business at that point for about 10 years then of that. And I was like, that's a rotten trick, dude. I mean, I know we've never met each other, but I know what you're doing, and that's kind of a rotten trick, just to throw somebody's name around. Well, I wasn't into Buffy, I actually was into Firefly or Serenity, and I knew Joss from pop culture. Like everybody, you know the name. You may not know the details, but you know the name. And I thought, yeah, right, Joss Whedon wants me to work for this book. Sure, whatever. And he sent back another email. Yeah, dude, seriously, I'm not kidding. Joss really wants you. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I was just being like, flippant about it. I'm like, right, whatever. If Joss wants me, tell Joss to send me an email. Thinking I would have called his bluff and that would have been the end of it. And the next email I get, hi, this is Joss Whedon and I really like your work and I'd love you to do this. Talk about an about face. Hi, Mr. Whedon, God, I am so a fan of your work. I love what you do and all that. And of course in doing so I had to, not that I had to say, because they were like, are you familiar with Buffy? I'm like, yeah, sure, are you kidding? Oh, it's a great show, about a girl, right, who kills vampires, right? She's a vampire slayer, if I'm not mistaken, right? You're like, yeah, okay. And then Dark Horse was nice enough, after everything was finalized, to send me season 6 and 7 of the series. They're like, well, there have been 7 seasons. 6 and 7 are probably the ones you were going to be focusing on a lot more, so we'll send you that. If you can watch all these as soon as you can, motor through it and get caught up, because we'll be, the script will basically take place thereafter. And I was like, oh, okay, so for about a month, oh my God, I was immersed in Buffy. So every day, 1 or 2 episodes at least, I was sitting there. I got it down to, they were 42 minutes long. The intro was, a minute and a half, so I knew exactly how long I was spending watching Buffy's. And from there, I really did become a fan. I was like, God, this is actually good. This is pretty good. So on my own, I went and got seasons 1 through 5. So in a weird way, technically, the end of season 5, which of course is where Buffy sacrifices herself for Dawn and she dies, that was the end for me. I was like, okay, well that's where it ended. And it never clicked, because my 6 and 7 were my first and second seasons that I'd gotten. And it just in my head somewhere, it was always like, oh, well she ends up dying. I'm like, oh no, wait, that was the 5th season, and she comes back. So I just became a fan. And then of course, that was the gateway drug. Then you have to go get Angel, and from there, it's funny, because as I was doing it, and I was doing cons and meeting people at that time, people were like, okay, well, you have to watch Angel, because in Angel season 5, it carries on a lot of what Buffy was doing, because Buffy had ended, and season 5 was like the latest season to come out that still had anything relevant about that. And then they're like, and then once you're finished with that, and you're feeling like there's just no hope to go on, Veronica Mars is actually a great pickup series to go, because it's a lot like Buffy, and if you like that, you'll really love this. So I was just watching stuff for years thereafter, on the strength of a lot of people's recommendations. So, long story short, yeah, Joss picked me to draw the book.
Was there something that he made, some work of yours in particular, that drew him to you?
I think it was that Bishop, the last X-Men. I know he's a big Marvel fan, and he was reading either that or Gambit. I'm not 100% sure, but it had to have been one of those two titles. Yeah. So that, I'm assuming, was the case.
I also wanted to ask about your art background outside of comics, or within it. Who are your greatest artistic influences and inspirations?
When I got into college, I had a great teacher. He was a commercial art teacher. Funny, he did a lot of work in the 70s for Kodak. I don't know if anybody remembers that, or Eastman Kodak. They used to do film when there was film and cameras. And they were a huge, huge company. I mean, he worked for them as a commercial artist, and this guy opened my eyes. This guy named George Anderson, I think he's passed on at this point. But I mean, I was, like in our culture, you're aware of the Norman Rockwells of the world, and just the general art that you see either at Christmas time or whatever. But this guy opened my eyes to like the American artists, like the Dean Cornwells, the J.C. Leyendeckers, and the other artists, the European artist Alphonse Mucha, who's probably a very big influence in comics. I was just getting my eyes opened every day when I went to college. So a lot of the American artists is who I really credit, if there is an outside influence in comics in that.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you look, I've always wondered, like, I know artists get to other artists for inspiration. Do you have certain people that you look to, like being in charge or spark?
Still today, yeah, well, when I was younger, and I was heavily reading in the 80s, going to school, and then the 90s and whatnot. John Byrne, I thought Joss was, as the bio states quite correctly, that he was just, I couldn't believe that why he didn't do every book. When you're just so in love with an artist, going, this guy's amazing, he should do every book that could ever come out. Now, being an artist, I can only do one book. I could never say, he did about 3 books a month every now and again. And I'm astounded by that sort of thing. And even today, a guy named Alan Davis, who's an artist, and he just did that Marvel Annuals right now with the Clandestine just recently. And he's a great, great artist. Michael Golden, he did the Micronauts years and years ago, and he's just a really great artist. And just anybody who was good, who was sort of against the norm, the Bernie Wrightsons of the world, Barry Windsor Smith, just those guys who, sadly, well, I guess with the exception of Byrne, didn't really do monthly books, but they did these 1 or 2 titles like Art Adams, where they're like incredible, incredible books when you did see them come out. So, and as a reader, you just sit there and go, why couldn't they do all of these books? And as a professional, you understand why they couldn't do all of these books.
Okay, that's really interesting. I read also in an interview that Joss told you wanted Buffy to look like Buffy, not necessarily Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yeah, and that's it.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, because for me, as a fan of the show first, Sarah Michelle Gellar is what Buffy looks like to me. So I thought, and your likenesses in the comic are, it's Buffy, obviously, it's totally Buffy, but I think of SMG also.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, like what did he mean, or what do you take as meaning?
Yeah, well, and it wasn't, and it's funny, I read an interview, and it's funny when you leave a word out, because when you said that, you said didn't necessarily want it to look like a Sarah Michelle Gellar, And the necessarily part is actually very important because I heard somebody say, yeah, he didn't want it to look like Sarah Michelle Gellar. And I'm like, oh wait, no, that wasn't the case. When I got it, we talked a lot when I first got the kid, because he was actually very excited. You know, at this point, Buffy went off the air, in 2004, and this was 2006 when we were putting things into production. It didn't come out until 2007. So this had been about 3 years or so where he was really, and I really felt as I was talking to Joss, not knowing the history, I'm sure as all you do now, that this was a girl he loved. Like this was always, I felt the comics initially were a love letter to Buffy from this guy named Joss, who really loves this girl. And as I'm talking to him, I'm like, well, Joss, I'm so honored that you want me to do this, and that I will do this to the best of my ability, and I will give you 100%. I'm just not really big on character. I don't know that I can get the likenesses right. I've never really done that. I've played around with some of the Star Trek stuff, but I've never really gone ahead and done likenesses like this. And he's like, well, that's cool. I don't, and he was like, I read comics, and I see a lot of the stuff that comes out there, and in all honesty, I hate that photo comics that they do where you see the characters like this and she's supposed to be happy, or the expressions don't match the image is what he was trying to get into. And he was telling me, it's okay, don't feel like you have to be a slave to the actual people. And he used Sarah as an example. He's like, make Buffy look like Buffy. She doesn't necessarily have to look like Sarah Michelle Gellar. And that just put it in perspective for me that, oh yeah, he didn't want it to be this photorealistic Buffy. He's like, I want her to develop a look in the comics. Like, what does she look like if you were to put a string of pictures of Buffy, and you'd see Sarah Michelle Gellar over the years, and then you'd see her in season 8 and 9, and I wanted that to have its own look as well. And I thought, oh my God, yeah, you put it right in perspective. Because obviously not only Buffy, you've got Xander, Giles, Willow, Tara, Andrew, all of these other characters where I'm going, God, I gotta draw more. It's one thing to say, oh, I have that one person to draw, but you're like, everybody knows all these other characters. And in some cases, people love these other characters more. I can't tell you how many people are like, well, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I just love Willow. I'm sorry, or I'm just so into Spike, I just watch the show because I love Spike type of a thing. So I had to get everybody down. So it was an arduous process trying to do the likeness. And not that it mattered necessarily, but in order to do, well, at least with 20th Century Fox, which has a great relationship with Dark Horse because, of course, they also do Star Wars and they do Predator every now and again, and a couple of other titles. So they have an interesting relationship in that it's a lot more informal. And in order to work on a 20th Century Fox project, you do have to get approved by 20th Century Fox. And so I did have to submit some, sketches and designs of the characters I would be doing. But that was more of and it's funny, that was more of an official thing. It wasn't like, well, if they don't like you, forget it. They just want to make sure, yeah, you're not going to draw Buffy like a troll, or, just take it so left of center that, and believe it or not, they've actually had that problem where they thought, she just looks too ugly. Why did you get this particular artist? Because this doesn't look like what we wanted her to look like. So that was that. So I just did a very generic version and sent it in, and they're like, yeah, all right, he's cool, good. I think, though, if I had Joss's okay, everybody else was like, oh, what did he say? Okay, yeah, fine, he's good. Let him go. So it's great to have Joss in your corner. I realized a lot of red tape I never have to deal with. It's basically because, Joss is over there going, I know, it's good, just let it go, pass it on. So, yeah, it's very cool.
I wanted to ask, what do you think, since you've taken this story that was told through TV, what do you think comics can do that TV storytelling can't do as well?
Well, that's funny because that's another conversation I had with Joss. And because I was always like, I'm like you guys, I'm a big fan of the movies, and I love the idea of a TV show or a movie coming into a comic book. If you can give me something different, that would be great. And again, at the beginning, Joss and I were talking a lot. I'm sure I was just talking his ear off because I was more interested in what we were doing rather than saying, so yeah, you worked with Sarah Michelle, how was that to be? It was more on a technical level. And I asked him, yeah, well, what's the difference here? Why come back to this? Do you think people are going to respond? Because obviously the difference between a TV show, because you're sitting there going, why not just do a movie? You know, why not get a Buffy movie going and all that? And he was like, in all honesty, I write the script and then I give it to you and you draw it. And that's it. He's like, I don't have to go through actors, I don't have to go through a set designer, I don't have to go to a director, I don't have to, you know, he's like, I love that business, but there are so many people you have to go through when you're doing a TV show, movie, whatever. And he's like, I love this, it's just you and me. You know, this is the part that I love. And in all honesty, why I'm doing it in comic books. You know, I could have done it as a novel or in any other medium like that, any print medium. And he's like, comic books have moved me when I was a kid. You know, I was always in love with comics. And I think we can do that in Buffy. Because I was like, well, yeah, you had, you know, the series was coming out. And he's like, yeah, honestly, I didn't like those as much. This is the stuff that's going to be canon. You know, this is where we're going to take up anybody who is interested in the season 7 ending can pick up season 8 and it'll be, you know, legitimate. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's actually very cool. So to that end, he said, we have an unlimited budget and we can do whatever we want. And that was his big difference. Because he had told me in season 8, you know, Dawn becomes a giant for a little while. And he's like, actually, when we were doing season 7, I had that idea because you notice there's not much with Dawn in season 7. And I actually had that idea. Wouldn't it be funny, ha ha ha, if Dawn, you know, was because he said it's the little technical, how things come about is so weird. He's like, when we hired Michelle Trachtenberg, you know, in season 5, she was this little precursor to Buffy. She was going to be the little sister, you know, the little annoying sister, whatever. Well, what we didn't realize as we were going, you know, this little girl, she was 15 when she came on, this little girl shot up. She actually grew. You know, it's like, oh, she actually grew up. And she was getting taller than Buffy. And more we sort of had the problem of, well, this is Buffy's little sister, but obviously Dawn wasn't the little sister anymore. And of course, Joss extended that to go, wow, what if she just became way big? And, you know, was really the big little sister to Buffy. And he's like, that's where in season 8, I could get away with making Dawn a giant and play with that. But he's like, you know, special effects wise, we were cost prohibitive. I could have never done that on the television for as long as we did, because he's like, I didn't want it to be one episode. I wanted it to go on. As you know, as anybody watches Buffy, you know, it's like a whole season is like almost one big episode in a sense. And he wanted that to really carry over. So little things like that. He was more than ecstatic to do that in comic books, yeah.
An artistic perspective on the storytelling.
Yeah. He was, and he's very visual. And if you watch Buffy, the thing I got most out of watching all of the DVDs is how much influence comics have in the Buffy thing. I know for a fact, and most Buffalo can tell me the episode right away because I'm always forgetting. The one where Buffy and, have you not seen those episodes? Are you still catching up, sweetie?
I am just a very sorry.
What season are you on? Oh God, season 1's the worst too. It gets so much better. So, because season 2 is where Spike comes around. I'm sorry, you're probably going to lose her when Spike comes around and all that, like most people do. But it gets so much better, so please. But I'm not giving anything away, because you don't even know who Faith is at this point. The episode where Faith and Buffy switch for a little while, anybody who remembers that? There's a little apparatus where they both hold at one time. And it's funny, Joss had said, I want that little apparatus that they both have to look like something Kirby would have done. You know, and that's the kind of references he would have. And of course, that's a comic book reference if you know Jack Kirby, who created the Marvel Universe and all that. And Joss would say that's the kind of stuff I would really throw in there. And a lot of the crew and whatever, if they didn't know comics, they were like, what? Oh, okay, just tell me what you want. Don't give me this Kirby crap. I don't know what that is. So there was a lot of Kirby, or there is a lot of Kirby influence in Buffy, more than I thought that there would be. So I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
A lot of the Buffy fans relate especially to one character on the show.
Oh God, tell me.
Do you relate to a particular character? Do you have like one?
That's interesting, because in doing the comic books, I have to get in everybody's head, because of course I'm the artist, and you know, I'm one of those types of artists now, and this is why I love doing a genre type thing or a media book, in that I love to take what you've seen someplace else, whether it be a movie or a TV show, and really try to incorporate that in the comic book. So every time I'm drawing something, I really am thinking, what would Buffy do? Or what would she be when her and Willow are talking, how would she be standing? Or, anybody who knows Xander, as you're just now getting to know Xander, he has very particular things. He's so kind of like animated. He does this a lot and all that. And as I'm drawing the book, I really try to incorporate in my mind, I think, all right, this is the scene. I let the actors play out the scene and ask myself, well, what would they be doing in those particular things? And you'll notice, Willow does certain things. Buffy does certain things. Obviously, and oh my God, when Andrew comes on, he's like so all the way out here. You won't see him until, season 4 or 5, so this will be a while. But they all have their own mannerisms and quirks, which I love to emulate. And I'm always trying to do that in comics. So not necessarily one favorite, because I do have to get in everybody's head. But, I always like to say, I'm a faithful guy. So I usually try to stay with the girl I came with to the prom. And Buffy is who I came with. So if there is a favorite. I love Faith. Faith is a bad girl. Just FYI. And for some reason, I don't know if you know this, men seem to really go for bad girls, just like the girls seem to kind of go for bad guys. Faith is kind of that, but she's a bad girl with a heart, whatever. And we just fall for that hook, line, and sinker. So just as you'll find, Angel is a bad guy with a heart and a line. That's why Buffy fell in love with him. And then when Spike comes along, you'll see sort of along those same lines. So that is why I probably would go with Faith a little more, but I will officially say Buffy.
It sounds like you're going on your acting background in a way.
Always, yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of theater. And in theater, it obviously it's the line that's the important thing, because you're on stage and people are watching you, and they're like, even if you don't have a line, you should be in character. You should be doing something. And when you do theater, that's ingrained in you so much. So as I draw and illustrate a scene, I try to think, well, even if that character isn't talking, what is that character doing? What does that character wear? What is that character like? Is she having coffee? Are they eating cheese doodles or something? What are they actually doing? And I try to integrate that a lot into what I do. And it's funny, because a lot of who they are comes across. Like, obviously you don't know this, but Willow, if you notice, if you go back and watch a lot of the episodes, which I didn't get until I really started getting into her, because Willow becomes a witch at some point. She's sort of delving into magic, but she becomes a witch, but that's not a spoiler, because, she becomes a really powerful witch. If you get the idea of the Wicca line, that's a very earth religion, and it's all, the Mother Earth and, the she-god and all that. And as a result, if you notice, Willow wears a lot of floral patterns as dresses, pants, or whatever. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing, because she is a witch. It almost seems logical, that she would have a lot of earth colors and then wear floral patterns on her dresses. So whenever I put her in something, I try to keep it in mind with what I guess the costume designer had when they were doing the episodes. So yeah, little things like that. And I'm so anal about things. Like Spike is left-handed. I don't know if you guys know that. And of course, we live in a right-handed world, because I'm left-handed, and I understand how arduous left-handers have it sometimes. So every time, because when you're saying something, if you're right-handed, naturally you're going to go, oh my God, what was that? Yeah, this. Or when you're holding something or writing something, you tend to go with your right hand. But if you'll notice, again, not a big deal, but when Spike is doing something, it's the opposite, because I'm a lefty, and whenever I do something, I'm doing it with my dominant hand. And I'll have Spike do the same thing. So little subtleties like that, you're sitting there going, God, that Georges is a genius. Or hopefully, so.
This is such a long running for one artist on a comic, as we were talking about.
Yes.
And I was wondering if, is that a challenge for you? To
Yes.
stay fresh? What do you do to...
Well, it's a testament to the genre, to the writing. I think it's great. I give Joss total kudos for having or getting, because I thought it might be hard to, because he was like, when we first started, I'm going to try to get a lot of the writers from the TV show to come and write comics. They may not have ever written comics before, and a lot of them hadn't. But he was like, well, I'm just going to ask him anyway, because when we were together doing the TV show, everybody was loving it, and they weren't there obligatory. Obviously, you're getting paid But they were like, we really are into this thing. And without exception, to my knowledge, everybody who was asked came back. You know, Jane Espenson, Drew Goddard, Stephen DeKnight, a couple of other people they were trying to get that just through conflict, scheduling conflicts, couldn't make it back. But everybody who was interested or working with Buffy was more than happy to come back. And that was a great, great thing, I think, for Joss and for the series, because it did have that level of uniqueness that you just had in Buffy. And there were one or two other writers who weren't on the show who just were Buffy fans who I thought it stepped up their game. And when I talked to them, very much, they said, yeah, I get to work with Joss Whedon. I get to do Buffy. That I love this series. And I think all the non-Buffy writers definitely had their game stepped up coming to do Buffy. Hi, welcome, come on in. See if you can find a seat somewhere. I know it's a little crowded. Don't let that inhibit you. It's okay. We're serving coffee afterwards. It'll be nice.
Now, I know there's a new issue coming out that's stirred up some controversy among the fans.
There is?
Billy.
Oh, Billy.
Yeah, well,
Billy the Vampire Slayer.
I was wondering how you felt about it when you heard about that story.
I don't know. Honestly, what is that? That's issue 14, I want to say. I'm actually on issue 19, so I don't really know what the controversy is because my involvement is long since past. So I'm not sure what have you heard. Well, and actually, I didn't do those two. It's going to be 2 issues. I didn't do those 2 issues. I had to jump from 14, 15 to 16 and do another arc because, of course, this book comes out monthly. And again, I thought John Byrne could do every book of the month monthly, but I realized I can't even do a book a month. I can do maybe 10 books a year. But of course, there's 12 months in a year, so that doesn't necessarily work out as a monthly book. So there had to be fill-ins. And with this 2 issue, since it dealt more with someone else, they thought, maybe it's a better idea if you don't do those issues so we can get you on the ones where Buffy and all the other gang are actually going. So I know of the series. I don't know what the controversy is, though. I know
he's gay, but I don't think
Right.
it's a controversy. I think the fact that he's a male and he takes on the...
and the
fans
Slayer
were
role.
complaining that, Xander has already done that and Giles has
Right.
already done that. And why is this a big thing that there's a male Slayer? Although all I saw was Jane Spenson's writing it, so I'm like, I gotta get that
Right,
one.
yeah.
For stories.
Jane Espenson was coming in, and she loves, because she's also doing something else for Dark Horse called Houses, about two men being married to each other and the trials and tribulations and wacky.
As a
and
comic.
silly.
Is that from
As
the
a
TV?
comic,
Is
yeah,
that-
and from the TV, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I was on a panel with her in Dragon Con a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that. So.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
She's very excited. And Jane is another one. She's, of course, Jane Espenson is a writer. She's doing Once Upon a Time right now. She's one of the head writers on that TV show. She wrote that Battlestar Galactica preview. Galactica, was it? I'm assuming, no. So she's a very prolific writer. Buffy is not her only credit. She writes and writes and
She wrote
writes.
for the show, though, so much.
And she wrote, some for the show, and she was a showrunner for the prequel. I think it's Galactica, they called it. So anyway, but yeah, she's doing something called Houses, which I think is a web series. Husbands, I'm sorry, Husbands. It's Husbands, yes. I'm thinking Houses, the Hugh Laurie thing, never mind. But yeah, that, and they're doing it as a comic book as well, so that should be very cool. And right, so she's writing those 2 issues about the gay vampire slayer, which, again, I don't know if that's the controversy or if it is the fact
Well, I
that
thought it
he's
was
a
that
male.
he was a male. That's what I read from the fans was.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard
So
that.
anyway, is anyone bothered by Billy?
Anybody know about that? Well, you guys, I guess. Well, you guys now haven't caught up.
I read online the same thing.
Yeah.
Or what they're done for, why it's a big deal.
Right. I don't think the gay part, I don't think people thought it was a controversy at all. It was that he's a mere mortal. It's not a girl, he's not the chosen one.
Yeah, what's he doing? Which I do
But he's
know.
like Batman. I think the idea is he's like, he's doing like what Batman does.
Yeah, it does
He's doing that.
play into it because he sticks around. Because I've actually had to draw him subsequently from those 2 issues. He does stick around, and he's in the series a little bit. So it is dealt with that. Yeah, you don't have powers. You're this I think he's a high school kid. He's in high school, and so that actually does come into play with Buffy later on as well.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll give a mic to you guys if you guys have some questions to ask.
Oh, you can just shout it out, I think,
Yeah,
at this point.
My last question is, who's your favorite big bad from Buffy?
My favorite big bad ever. You know, I have to say, because I have become such dear friends. Well, I guess that's two, I would have to say. I've become very friendly with Juliet Landau, who's Drusilla, who plays Drusilla. And I mean, she's a dear, dear friend. It's funny, too. She's nothing like Drusilla, for one thing. Because she's so nice and so sweet. You know, you're like, you're not crazy at all. And Claire Kramer, who played Glory in season 5, is the big bad, which you'll find out. She's a big deal. Is another sweetheart, and we've become really friendly on that level also. So I would have to say those two, just because we have this association. Which is funny. Just a quick side story about Drusilla. I didn't know this either, because of course I came in late. It's funny, I'm a fan now, and I only wish I was a fan and I was doing all of this when all of it was happening. Because, you know, there were Buffy cruises, there were Buffy conventions, there was all this Buffy stuff, and I was like, I would have loved to have done that. So now I'm playing catch up, and I never understood the effect that Drusilla had. And anybody watched it when it was actually on television? Anyone? Yeah? So you were sort of week after week, kind of like what we're doing with Glee now. You sort of have to watch whatever you have, and you can't skip forward or watch another episode or do that, yeah, to find out what happened. Or even worse yet, you have to wait a whole summer in between season so-and-so and so-and-so before you can find out. Which is funny, another funny story about that. But with the Drusilla stuff, I did the first show I did with Juliet was a show in Paris. And I was there, it was just me and her. It was a really small show, it was a very intimate show. And I was, of course, there's me, and then there's Juliet. So, I'm one of those, I'm just here to admire you, to be honest with you. And I've noticed how people came up to her, though. And again, when I met her, I didn't really know about her character as much. I just met her and said, you're a very nice woman. You seem very pleasant to be with and all that. And I saw people meeting her that were kind of dubious, kind of like, hi. Because they were looking at her, as I found out later, as her character. That maybe she was going to do this little whammy like she did on Kendra and, slit her throat or something like that. Kendra's another person coming in that you'll find out about a little later. That came in and they had this fear of her. And I later talked to Juliet about that, going, what is that about? And she's like, I can only assume that it's the character. They really, they've obviously, because he's like, yeah, we're sitting here having dinner. That's one thing. Most people have never met me or whatever, just come up for the first time. And it was an eye-opener to see people afraid of this very sweet woman. And you go, wow, that's just a testament to your character that, they grew up very much like, I guess, our grandparents grew up thinking the Wicked Witch was a really nasty character. They were growing up thinking that Drusilla was a really, really nasty character. And I was like, wow. So I guess it really does speak to how well she did her role and all. And then the other thing about seeing it when it was coming out, I talked to a guy, because when I was really getting into it, I loved the idea of just being able to should I put in another episode? Should I watch again? Is this a Saturday where I could just sit and watch all day if I want to? There were a couple times, and I don't want to put any spoilers to you, but there were a couple of major events that happened, and I'm sure you guys who know these major life-altering events for certain characters that I talked, when I was doing shows, I started, as Buffy then started coming out in season 8, I was starting to do shows, and people were, of course, like you guys, coming up and saying, oh, well, I love Buffy, and everybody has a Buffy story, and they want to tell you their story. And I talked to one guy, because I was really interested. I'm like, so you were watching it when it was coming out? And he's like, oh, yeah, I was there. And he was old enough so that, I don't know, he might have been in college, and then since Buffy ran 7 years, he was in his 20s by the time it was all over. And he was like, oh, yeah, no, I was watching it. And I'm like, so, and again, no, I won't spoil anything for you, but so with Buffy's mother, how did you deal with that? Because there's a whole episode there, and then you had to wait for the next episode to really, see how everybody else felt and all that. And he's like, oh my God, it was killing me. I was dying. And I was like, so what about in episode 5 at the end of that when something happens to Buffy that's pretty big? I was like, well, you had to wait till season 6 to find out what happened and all. And he's like, oh my God, it was like the worst summer of my life, seriously. And you're going, it's just a damn TV show. How am I so into this thing? And he's like, yeah, it was like I could not wait until they said, oh, premiering September so-and-so, the new episode, season of Buffy, this and this and this. And I was just, I couldn't do it. Everybody knows with Joyce, especially with the Joyce thing, I had to, as you watch it, you don't realize it's happening. And then when it does happen, I had to put in the next episode because I could not let that be the episode that ended it for me. I was like, no, I gotta cleanse my palate. There's nothing, I can't go to sleep tonight until I end it on a different note, other than the note it ended there. And I was like, oh no, and I did that a couple, and God help me when Tara comes along, and that whole thing, I was like, oh my God, what, you are killing me. And I mean, the idea that, and you better have some Kleenex around, especially with season 3 when Oz comes around and Oz and Willow start to go out. You don't know who Oz is yet, but he becomes very important and you're gonna really love this whole thing. But then a bad thing happens, and oh my God, I consider myself, I'm very in touch with my feelings, but I was wrecked. I mean, I was crying. There was, when Oz does what he does for the last time, or the first time he does what he does, I was like, oh my God, how could you do this? You're really emotionally involved. And whenever anybody asks me, why do you think Buffy's lasted this long, which is usually a common question, and it's, well, what do you think the longevity is I always say, because I learned this in theater, the worst thing you can do is make somebody care about something, like your character, or what you've done. Because when you do, it no longer becomes yours, the person who created it. It becomes the people who are affected by it. And as a result, they feel a certain propriety towards that. And of course, as you know, with Tara being such a popular character and what happens, people are still talking about that because they cared about that character so much. Or Willow, or what happens with Willow and all that. It's just something where you're like, I am so invested because you made me care about this character. And as a result, the downside, of course, is people have all their own opinions about what should have happened or what should happen to these characters as a result. But yeah, I was like, Joss, that is a testament.
He's the master of that.
You make these people care. Yeah, you make these people care about these, you make the audience care about these characters, and of course they're going to have an opinion. They're going to say, I don't like what you did. I don't think I did. Like when in season 8, now we're getting into what I do, something bad happens to Giles. Which seems to be a running theme here, as you'll notice, so you better catch up quick. I could, because I was closely related to that in season 8, I had more of an opinion on that, and I swear people back and forth, left and right about, no, that shouldn't have been the case. I think he jumped the shark, or this shouldn't have been, and there were just so many opinions about why that was the case. And I think, again, that's to his credit. Everybody is, it's not so much what you're fighting about, but it's the passion you have that I think is important. And it's the passion that people have about Buffy that I think speaks volumes. And I'm right there with you. Like I said, we could probably sit here for a while and talk about the episodes, and all of us will have, I liked Andrew, or I liked when so-and-so did this, and you can speak about it with such passion. And even a couple times when I'm watching certain episodes, like the one with Buffy's mom, which I won't go into, I can't watch it. I cannot watch, I'm sure there's a lot of you, I can't watch that episode. It's like, no, it already happened, it happened once, I don't want to go through it again. Just leave it there, it happened, let's put it behind us. So I don't know, when was that, season 5 or something? Yeah, there's just, it's a good season, but it's a season that's fragmented for me, so because I won't watch every episode because of what happens and all that. So, yeah.
Do you have some questions?
Either they're making this very enticing for you to watch, or it's like, screw it. If there's going to be all this, I don't like it, then I'm not going to watch it.
She won't be able to help herself.
You'll be hooked, though. Oh my! It's like smoking. You are going to be hooked, and you will love it forever. But it's not going to be any good for you because then you'll be a part of it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's great. Anybody have some questions? Yeah.
So you're a smoker, huh?
No, I'm not a smoker, but it's funny. I was actually, I don't know why this would make it come around. I used to be a youth minister, and one of my kids, his mother. You know how you're trying to politically correct, and you got to be, because it's a church and all that, and we weren't like staunch God, but you try to project a nice image. And one of the kids, who was a really nice kid, I met his mom. God help me though, this woman would always break out a cigarette whenever we're talking. And here you are at church with a bunch of kids. You don't want them to look at you smoking. Come on. And it's because the kid was like, oh no, my mom's cool. If you want to talk to her about it, go ahead, talk to her about it. And I said, Mrs. So-and-so, we were just with a bunch of kids outside one day, kind of hanging. I said, cigarettes really aren't good for you. Why are you smoking? She's like, honey, I know they are awful. You should never do it. But if you do, you will love it forever and you will be hooked. So don't smoke. I thought that was a weird way to discourage somebody from doing something. You're going to be in love with it forever, so don't pick it up. You're like, well, that's just telling them to go ahead and pick up a pack of marbles right now. So that's why I use that relationship, because that always affected me. That's kind of weird. And that's exactly how I feel about Buffy. It's like, it's bad for you in the sense of it's going to demand a lot of emotion from you, and not all of it's going to be good. But at the end of the day, are you one of those people, God, I'm so happy I felt something, as opposed to watching all these other TV shows where you don't feel anything. And this will be the total opposite. So, anybody?
I just had a comment. We were talking about how when you watched it, when it first came out, you had to wait. I remember we didn't have, a DVR or a TiVo or anything like that. I remember
Back in our days when we were younger, huh?
Yeah,
When TVs were like big instead of flat. Yeah, what is that?
having to sit there, you break out the scenes on the television show, after the first cliffhanger,
Yeah.
3 minutes, you're like,
Oh, no. Or worse yet, that's where the episode ended. You're like, oh, now I gotta wait next week. Are you kidding me?
yeah, there were a couple of times I had to watch with my parents and with my mom. We said, that's it? It's gonna end like
Okay,
that.
without giving anything away, can you bring up one?
Well, anything in season 5 of Angel, that's where I watched it.
Oh, season 5 of Angel, okay.
So, the whole thing with Fred.
Oh my God. Oh, once you get into Angel, there's a girl named Fred.
So that part, my mom was
Heartbreaking.
Listen,
Talk about needing your tissues.
Right, and that was a weird thing, because, well, if you knew that it was ending in that season, that was like 5 or 6 episodes before the series ended. So you're like, what the hell? What's going on here?
Yeah, I remember when it came out, it's like a couple episodes
Mhm.
before, and then they released it, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna cancel. She was like,
Right.
what is it doing?
Wait a minute.
I have no idea.
Mhm. Yeah, oh, very heartbreaking, I tell you. You're in for a lot, sweetie.
Is there a recent comic coming out?
There is. I should talk a little business. I'm always into let's talk about Buffy. And I never say, well, we have some business to do here. Buffy comes out every month. It's on the 13th issue. I have all of this stuff down at the table. Anybody who needs any back issues, I have them for sale, all cover price. There's a very nice hardcover that Dark Horse has just started putting out, which is sort of the defined collector's coffee table edition. It's a little bit bigger than a comic book, and it's basically has 10 issues in it. So there'll be 4 volumes of season 8. And the beauty of it is that there is an extra 20 pages of just supplemental artwork. And the beauty, I don't know how Dark Horse can do this, but a volume like that, which on average other companies are selling, or they have theirs retailed for $50 to $70 to $80. Dark Horse has got it down to $30 for some reason, so it's very reasonable and a great volume to pick up if you want to give a gift or if you want to introduce it into that. I've only brought 4 because these damn things are so heavy. I had to take stuff on the plane, and I wouldn't be able to take more than that. So if anybody's interested, I have 4, so not that this is such a big crowd that everybody's going to make a rush for it, but I have stuff over there. And the Angel series is coming out. There is a Spike limited series coming out right now. They're on the 2nd issue, I want to say, and that'll be a 4-issue run as well, that Spike is now on his own, dealing, of course, with Buffy, because Buffy is just such a little drama queen. She affects everybody. And there will be the Willow series after the Spike series finishes that will be coming out, because Willow now is making an appearance in the Angel series, that from there she will go into her own series. And yes, hopefully before the season 9 is over, the Drusilla series will be coming out. Because Buffy season 9 is mandated at 25 issues, and it'll be 25 issues coming out. That'll be season 9. There has been talk, everybody says, about a season 10. There's no official word yet. I'm sure they kind of want to get through season 9 a little bit more before anybody says anything. But I think it's in all likelihood there might be one. So, business, yeah, and yeah, it's just Buffy every month. So anybody who's picking it up, please continue to do so, and by all means, come by, and if you wanted to share any of your personal moments without spoiling anything, come by and we'll talk over there. Any more questions before we wrap it up? Anybody have anything to say? Nothing? God, you're a quiet crowd. Well, thank you guys for coming out. It was very intimate, but I think we cherish it all the more. Thanks, guys. Like I said, I'll be downstairs, so if you want to talk, please come by.